You're gonna be there. Okay. Thank you, everybody who's here in the public, for your patience while we work through that. We do have a motion that we'd like to make. It is, let me get my notes here. We will have two resolutions, but Amanda advises me that we can make one motion today to accept the terms of the MOU for the PBA and the Alliance, subject to ratification by those respective bargaining units and subject to execution by the chair, ultimately. Could I have a motion to that effect, please? Supervisor McGowan, and a second by Supervisor Conover. Is there any discussion here? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. So we'll have that. Amanda will work that up for us in two separate resolutions. Thank you very much. All right, and without any objection from the committee members, I would like to take our next guest speaker so that he can present and get on to his next event. And this is Mr. Stephen Aquario, the Executive Director of NISAC. And we're very pleased to have you here in person in Warren County today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Supervisor Bramer and supervisors. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am a resident of Warren County as well in Horkin. I don't know if Supervisor Smith is here, but or on Zooming, I'm not sure. But it's great to be here, of course, in Warren County. And thanks for letting me come up for a few minutes. Want to give a quick update on opioid litigation. And this is the front page of the Albany paper, which I imagine is up here as well, the Times Union. Opioid giants settle for $1 billion. I was very involved in opioid litigation going back to 2016. All the New York counties ultimately participated in this litigation. It's a very tragic situation, losing so many New Yorkers and Americans to substance abuse, addiction, dependency, and in some cases death. But we had to step up, and Warren County stepped up as well as the New York counties, and we ultimately drove a settlement just for the state of New York for $1 billion in one particular group of defendants, the distributors. So working with Bob, your county attorney, on the Board of Supervisors should begin to get information coming from outside counsel about what this means for Warren County over the next couple of months. I'm hoping by year's end that there'll be some funds that come in. And I want to commend you on your tracker that you just launched in Warren County, tracking overdoses and substance abuse problems here in Warren County. Continue to put an emphasis and focus on this. We need to develop treatment programs. These funds will go to treatment programs that we get in. Just about all the dollars that we receive will need to go to prevention, treatment, and recovery programs. So I encourage you, work with your hospitals, work with your healthcare centers, and begin to understand what kind of prevention, treatment, recovery programs does Warren County have available. Any questions on opioids before I switch out of opioids into environment? Yes.
Sure. Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you. With all this going on, Steve, and thank you for being so diligent, staying on this since 2016. But I guess my question, with all this going on and with the settlements and that, have you seen a trend of the opiate addictions going down?
We did in 2019. In 2019, we did see the change in prescribing behavior. We saw a change in the distribution, and so we saw a reduction in the number of pills that were, and we did that. You, Warren County, the supervisors, the counties of New York, changed the medical rules for prescribing. So we saw the number of pills go down, and we saw the number of deaths go down and addiction go down. However, during COVID 2020 and into 2021, we saw an uptick and a swing back up. So our efforts were working, and it does work. And prevention, treatment, and recovery programs, people couldn't get their treatment during COVID, like chemo and other services. They couldn't get it. So ultimately, we saw difficulties and problems come back. So hopefully with these funds, we can better address the problem.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Steve, I have a question to that effect. I know there was some talk about what the funds were going to be used for and or possibly diverted for other purposes. Is there any outcome on keeping those funds for medical treatment and services for people who are addicted or to prevent addictions?
Yes, there is no evidence-based medical or treatment programs like we have for cardiac, cancer, HIV type programs. There's evidence-based treatment protocols for those illnesses. For opioids and substance abuse, there hasn't been until now. And so as part of this settlement and a part of what you're going to see over the next couple of months are hundreds of approved uses that these funds can be used for prevention, for treatment, and recovery programs. So there'd be a long list of things the county can use for, and working with your providers in the county that they all have to work for and through, and the county will have a big role in this.
And I'm sure our Office of Mental Health Services will have a role in helping figure that out with our service providers.
Yes, they will.
Okay.
Hopefully your sheriff will as well.
Yeah, good point. And probably the DA.
And the DA, probation.
Okay, thank you.
So just to have a brief PowerPoint here, this was the local I live in Colony. So this was my local paper today when I opened it up. Today, do you know what's in your tap water? And here it talks about arsenic, benzene, chlorine, giardia, and improper pH. But as we've seen in the next slide, Tammy, I'll just show a couple of slides here. An unregulated contaminant in the state of New York, in the United States, in the world, but largely in the United States, is PFAS. A lot of you heard of this. John's heard of this in Queensbury. The county has heard of this. Kevin's heard of this. The DPW, Bob's heard of this. Ryan's heard of this issue. Many of the supervisors have heard of this issue. I'm here to educate, inform on PFAS. This is very commonly used chemicals, probably the most used chemical carbon compound ever known to mankind. This was used and developed in the 50s and 60s, widely used in manufacturing, very resistant to water. And it's used in Teflon and your anti-stick pans and things of that nature. Used, everyone knows of Scotchgard on our couches, upholstery, pizza boxes to repel grease. This stuff was used in everything. These manufacturers used this type of chemical in manufacturing and in firefighting foam. It was used to put out fires. Why? Because it really repelled and was able to put out fires in an aircraft or a helicopter. But it's come to be commonly known as the forever chemical because it does not go away. It stays in our environment. It stays, a half-life of this in a human being is probably 10 years, 9 years. It takes a very long time to get rid of. In fact, you can't even incinerate it. And you saw what happened in Cohoes, New York, where the state of New York actually banned the incineration of PFAS. Why? Because you can't even incinerate it. If they tried to do it, the Department of Defense was bringing these hundreds of millions of gallons of this and incinerating it in Cohoes. People of Cohoes got fed up with this, said you can't put it up in the air. It's coming down on our soil and it goes back into the environment and it just never goes away. Highly mobile in water. And it's been linked to similar types of health effects, kidney cancer, other types of cancer, in vitro problems with pregnancy, cholesterol, so forth, so on. Lots of tests on PFAS. So I won't show a bunch of slides, but next slide, I'll show just a couple. So the most common exposure pathway, you can see at the top there. I'm tracking this across the state of New York in landfills. State of New York is now testing all the landfills, all Superfund sites across the state. Manufacturing, the emissions which contain PFAS or discarding it into the environment, think Hoosick Falls. These sources contribute PFAS into our drinking water. You see that far right, farms, Wastewater treatment facilities to turning wastewater treatment into dry pellets. What are we doing with that? Anyone want to take a guess? Spreading it all over agricultural farmland. Again, leading towards leaching into our drinking water. The bottom left there, you see the military bases all across the state of New York, airports, other sources where we sprayed firefighting foam. I've taken calls from maybe a dozen New York counties on this issue right now, whether it's the airports of Warren or the airports of Oneida County, Dutchess, Westchester, Sullivan County, New York, same issue, all of us were forced to use aqueous film forming foam to spray mandatory FAA required exercises with firefighting foam, spraying it out there, practicing this either at the airport or at the fire training pits, the fire training centers, spraying it right off into the environment. Why? Because that's what the manufacturers told us to do through the MSDS sheets. Wastewater containing PFAS is that bottom chart there. And then again, the land application of biosolids. Next slide. So just another way of looking at that, this chart here shows PFAS in AFFF. This is the firefighting foam. This is largely why I wanted to come talk to you. You can see that you can't see it on the left side of it, but that's surface water. And you can see that surface water where the firefighting foam was used and practiced at the airport accumulates either in the surface water or in the groundwater where it goes down. It's either stored at airports all across New York State. Again, the fire training exercises in the groundwater, and it's a very common pathway here for affecting our environment. In my mind, if there is a detect of PFAS, PFOS, PFOA at an airport, we should be doing something about it and holding the manufacturers responsible for this, just like opioids in my mind. Next slide. We're regulating it in New York. When I was up here a couple years ago, I spoke to a committee, 2019. We talked about this issue.
Everyone may be thinking they stumbled into the Environmental Concerns Committee today. We did talk about this in the past at that committee when I was chair about the concerns.
I flagged it back then, but I thought that you should take action back then. But the reason why I'm back is there was just a health advisory by the United States government back then of 70 parts per trillion. It was 400 parts per trillion. They lowered it to 70 parts per trillion. But since then, see that second bullet there? State of New York has now set a maximum contaminant level of 10 parts per trillion for PFOS and PFOA. That's like an eyedropper in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It is so minute, the detect of these types of contaminants. They should not be in our drinking water in our environment. And if they are, we need to do something about it. And then that last slide talking about the banning of incineration by PFAS and CAHOs. Next slide. This is from a presentation we did a couple of weeks ago at NISAC statewide. We had about 150 people on it, county officials. This was the state health department talking about the emerging contaminants for PFOA, PFOS. Next slide. Again, the pathways, consumer goods, your packaging, going into your landfills. Keep an eye on this. I'm just flagging it for you. It's in our food chain. It's in our environment, firefighting foam, manufacturing, and again, that wastewater treatment, we're tracking it. This is a slide from the Department of Health. Next slide. And again, the state of New York doing a couple of maximum contaminant levels for PFOA and PFOS at 10 parts per trillion, and or also for 1,4-dioxane, which I also flagged for you. And next slide. The last slide, this will just be the last slide. I won't take up too much more of the time here of the supervisors, but this just last slide talks about, look, our drinking water is safe. We have the safest drinking water in the United States. We have the highest quality drinking water across America, but importantly for the state of New York. We really have done a fabulous job of monitoring our contaminants in our water, testing. All public water systems now must be tested in the state of New York and reported in. And that's a good thing. And we're checking for PFAS now. And I'm tracking this in landfills. I'm tracking this in airports, and I'm tracking it for county fire training facilities. Why? Because we're getting remediation letters from the DEC. requiring us to treat this. The good news is we can treat it. The good news is we can get this out of our environment. The bad news is it can be expensive for capital expenditures and also for ongoing monitoring and maintenance of these filters and these water filtration systems, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we have to monitor it for 10, 20 years. So it's a long time. It costs a lot of money to remediate and make sure that the contaminant is out of our systems. Where we're getting hits in Rockland County Fire Training Center, Putnam County Fire Training Center as well, Dutchess, their airport, Oneida, their airport, Chautauqua Fire Training Pit, things of that nature, Saranac Airport, same issue, Westchester Airport, same issue. So I'm up here, encourage you that if we do see a detect here at the airport, that you should join. We're working with the Napoli firm who is your attorneys, your outside counsel right now for opioids. There is no fee to the county on this. It's contingency based. There is no reason why we wouldn't want to encourage you to join in any way to protect yourself for damages that you might see down the line. You didn't cause this issue to be discharged into your environment. Let me make that clear. I'm talking with Ryan. We've talked about this in the past. You didn't cause this. WF Lake is right in an industrial park right next to the county airport. We're not about going after WF Lake, and it's not about the county discharging firefighting foam. We did what we were mandated to do in a safe, legal way. We were mandated to use this firefighting foam, and everyone did what they were supposed to do. What did these manufacturers know? What did they do about it? And did they warn end users of this product? So that's what I want to come up and talk to you about. I see it as a very emerging issue. There's already been 600 local governments, airports, wastewater treatment. The state of New York has also joined the lawsuit as well, but they're not representing Warren County's interest or the county's interest. They're representing their own interests. Just like opioids, got to have a seat at the table here. I do see eventually a trust being set up next 3 to 6 months, maybe even 9 months or a year, where funds will be set aside for remediation of this. So that's why I wanted to flag it. Again, we did nothing wrong. We followed our FAA mandatory responsibilities. This firefighting foam is largely banned in New York right now, but I encourage you to look around your town volunteer fire departments and make sure you get that stuff out of there. Took a call last week down in Westchester. I asked the supervisor to check at his fire department, called me back, says, yes, Steve, we've got several 500-gallon of this stuff sitting in our fire department. Can you help us get rid of it? Call the DEC. We don't have anywhere for you to take it, sir. You have to find somebody to take this stuff. It's like low-level radioactive waste, right? Nobody wants this stuff. So eventually you can't even incinerate it. So that's all I wanted to do. Come up, educate and inform, tell you about this issue. In my mind, this is the largest threat to our drinking water in our generation. This is a serious threat. Think of Hoosick and what happened there. That's not the situation in Warren County. It's not the situation at your airport. It's not the situation in Queensbury at the landfill right now. It's not the situation at all. But the presence of it is what concerns me. And the fact that it moves and is so permeable through soil, that it moves in one place so it could migrate over any unknown places. But the fact that if we get a detect of it, we got to keep an eye on it, and more importantly, we got to hold these manufacturers responsible for it. So that's what I wanted to come up and talk to you about. Give you a quick opioid update, and flag this issue of PFOA for the board's attention. So,
Well, thank you so much for coming. And I will remind the committee that I asked Mr. Aquario to come here along with Chairwoman Sieber because of the impact on the litigation, just like the opioid thing. So we're not here to talk about the, environmental remediation that may or may not be happening. We already dealt with the issue at the airport about changing out the training foam. We don't use the PFOAs anymore. That's been, settled a couple of years ago. But if there's any potential for us to partake or have a seat at the table on the litigation, I thought it was important that the committee at least hear about this opportunity and have a discussion about it. Chairwoman.
thank you again, Steve, for coming up. Steve mentioned this to me at the NACO conference, and again, wanted to make sure that our committee and our members here had a chance to weigh in before we ran out of time. And that's really what I understand it to be, a time-sensitive issue, that if it's something we want to join, you know, we need to be dealing with this now. And maybe you can speak just to that time.
Well, the reason why I brought it up was, I mean, I was here in 2019,
And yeah,
so that was 2 years ago. There's a 3-year statute of limitations, so that's why I flagged it. I mean, you don't have a problem, as Kevin can attest to, as your county attorney can talk to. You do not have a water quality problem in Warren County. Let me repeat that. You do not have a water quality problem. But what we had was a detect of PFOS at the airport, around the airport. We don't know how it got there. Could have been an industrial park adjacent to that area. The DEC has flagged this. There has been a spill, a reportable spill at WF Lake at the industrial park. It is there, it is present, and it is documented by the DEC. So I just flagged it. I was up here in 2019. I thought it was a concern back then, but now the state put the MCL standards in, and that was why I came back. And that's why I do recommend that you do join this. There's no harm to it in any way. It's a contingency fee, and only if they're successful. Any other questions on this or anything?
questions for
State budget,
Mr.
federal funding, federal funds, ARPA funds?
Supervisor Wild?
Madam Chair, thank you. Steve, I wonder if you could help me out. Early in my career, I was involved with Teflon.
Mhm.
And one of the things that was so popular about Teflon is that it was inert. It did not react with anything, which is along the lines of you can't incinerate it, you can't get rid of it, it sticks around a long time. My question relates to the top line of your last slide. It said it may be linked to health effects. May is a interesting word, right?
Mhm.
We don't have confirmation of that. What is the state of the confirmation of the
Yep.
health effects?
That's a good point. I think that the science has evolved. First of all, throw out the pans. I threw them out. Knowing what I know now about all those fans we had as kids, all of us as young adults, that was the big thing, the Teflon. I mean, I saved the sticker. I have it at my house. I'll send Ryan up a picture of the Teflon logo. They knew back then that there were studies that were linked to cancer, and it was discovered by 3M. We're really talking about 3M here, which is the largest manufacturer of the firefighting foam. About 80 to 85% was manufactured by 3M. But through these discovery of millions of documents in the Minnesota case, that they discovered that they knew back then in the 1970s, and they failed to warn the end user about the science and the adverse health effects. Since that time, there's over 600 local governments that have filed with massive discovery in a federal multi-district litigation in South Carolina, very similar to opioids. And what they continue to find is the adverse health effects and the science behind it. Not conclusively, but enough to show that there's an issue that they had noticed back then. They never shared that notice back then. They failed to warn, and that there's enough studies right now to justify that there is adverse health effects tied to this, potentially a la Huzik. So I
But
think the
again,
science
we
is there.
do not have that particular problem in Warren County.
You do not.
But I do think it would be prudent for us to preserve our rights to join the lawsuit. What's the pleasure of the committee?
You're not going to be the case that goes to trial
Right.
at all. That's already been decided. There are large systems across the United States that have been selected, just like opioids. Nassau and Suffolk counties were the counties who brought the litigation for the counties on behalf of the state of New York. There's other, we need to build critical mass. We have to send a message that we're not a litigious society. We're not just out there to litigate just to litigate, but when we have enough documentation to show that there was a discharge in our environment, we didn't cause it, you did, and you were responsible for releasing these manufacturers and distributors, that we should do something about it.
Yes, Supervisor Connell.
Question for our county attorney. Your recommendation at this point as being the county attorney?
Yep, without objection. Go ahead, Robert.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'd certainly like to look into it a bit more, just to make sure that there's no way at all that the county would have any adverse impact or liability on the county at all if there was anything like that. I mean, as I say, I kind of get paid to be paranoid, so I want to make sure there's absolutely no adverse impact at all of any kind towards the county based on this.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's.
Ron, I'm sorry. There was a comment that they can't hear
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think that's a prudent thing to do, provided that you keep an eye on the concern regarding the statute of limitations.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so without jeopardizing the statute of limitations, you'd be prepared at some point in time to make recommendations to the board?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So on the liability issue, I mean, we already know that DEC has been out to the airport and found this. I 2 years ago, I said to Steve, it's possible DEC will come after us as a party. But I don't see how that getting involved in the lawsuit is going to bring any more liability on us than we already have, potentially. They know we exist as a, I'm going to say a spot on the map where this has been found.
Right, no, I'm not disagreeing with anything that was presented here today or any of your statements. I'm just think that on legal matters, we should have a recommendation directly from the person responsible for advising the board on legal matters. If he needs a little bit of time to look at this, to get back to Mr. Query and then introduce appropriate resolutions at the appropriate time and ensuring that the statute of limitations is protected. I'm good with that. I'm good.
Anybody else on the committee?
Well, yeah, my only comment is I
Supervisor
know that we certainly, all the municipalities are testing their water, started testing water at least 2 years ago for these substances. Are these banned everywhere in the United States now?
Well, it's an unregulated contaminant by the United States. I had thought that I went down to Washington, the US EPA represented all the local governments in the United States in 2018 in the May summit. We thought that they would have taken action back then to regulate this contaminant, and they have not. They continue to have a health advisory out there, a health advisory, again, by the United States government. I think about 10 to 15 states have stepped forward. New Jersey, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Michigan, California, I think is almost at 2 parts per trillion. Almost 0 detect in California, and many other states as well are. So the states are driving this. New York has been a leader in it.
Okay, Supervisor Stroud had his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and thank you for all the help that I know you've given the town of Queensbury and everybody else. You're that kind of proactive person, and I think we deeply appreciate that kind of leadership we're seeing. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
With the opiates, it was clear that we had damages. We had people who succumbed to opiate addiction. We had costs associated with enforcement, recovery, so forth. It was clear that Warren County was in and a stakeholder in that game. With the PFAS and PFOAs, it's just not as apparent that we have some kind of stake in the game there, because our water in Queensbury not detecting any PFOAs or PFAs. FW Lake, which we know seems to be associated with contamination, but that's in Washington County. So do we need to show that we had some kind of injury befall us here in Warren County to be part of this?
No,
Okay.
it's just to detect the presence of it in the environment.
Okay.
And I mean, who knows with this stuff? Medical monitoring. Who knows the potential damages in 10 years from now or whatever it might be that would come about from it. Remember, it's highly mobile, highly persistent. It shows itself, in various areas, different locations, and you try to test it again and you can't find it. It's very, very mobile. But I would encourage all the towns and the cities to keep an eye on this, flag it, keep an eye on your landfills, watch your water tests, wastewater treatment, check your wastewater treatment plants, run some tests through there as well.
Brian wanted to say something?
Yeah, just as by way of update on this in terms of a monitoring and awareness issue, back in, I believe it was September last year when DEC declared a Superfund site over at WF Lake. I've been in touch with DEC since then. They're the regional leadership and have urged them, if practicable, when they choose their tests that they're doing, when they choose the wells that they're testing, to also be cognizant of the airport and to choose some, to try to give us a sense of whether we do have an issue at the airport in addition to the issue over at WF Lake. And that is ongoing. I talked to Mr. Zalewski as recently as 2 days ago about that. So it is something we're trying to work with DEC on to get a better global view of what's out there.
Want to thank the supervisors.
Okay, thank you.
Chairwoman Bramer, thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Any,
Yeah.
yep, one more supervisor. If you have
Yeah,
time.
Steve, just on another topic,
Yes, sir.
on your way home to,
Wait, before we go on to another subject, a whole nother subject?
sure.
Okay. I'm inclined to take a motion that we move forward with litigation subject to review by the county attorney. Anyone on the committee?
Well, maybe the way to do it is if the county attorney and the administration feel an imperative on this, and after his review, I mean, I'm prepared to support a waive rule at any time on a subject like this, should legislation come from the county attorney relative to this. I'm a little hesitant, you understand, acting on a legal matter without the advice of legal counsel. I mean, surely you can appreciate that. I'm not against it. I just would like him to have a little time here to do his due diligence on this. And so I'm not.
Anyone on the
Against.
committee object to that path? Okay, that's where we'll go then.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
May I,
Yes,
just on your way, you said you live in Horicon. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
You know, if you're just a few miles south, you'd be in Bolton, you know, you missed the mark
I know
there,
where you live,
Steve, a
yes,
little bit. But
yes.
in any event, on your way home, if you could travel up Route 9N from Lake George to Bolton and perhaps even in Horicon, I don't know, I haven't been up that way. What you'll see, these long stretches of brown zones along our roadways. And what we have going on is apparently and I don't remember this ever to this extent, the spraying of herbicides by DOT along our roadways. And I know you're talking about water quality here today. And I mean, Lake George is right there, of course, as you know. And so we're presently trying to arrange some meetings and some discussion with DOT relative to best practices in this regard. But if you get a chance on your way back home, if you travel 9N, just be aware that our New York State DOT has a practice here of spraying. And I think they come under the pesticide regulations and regulated by DEC. But regardless, I can't recall such extensive spraying. But then again, maybe I was oblivious to it prior to this. But I would just put that on your radar.
Well, Supervisor, thank you.
all right. Thank you again, Stephen, for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.
Okay, jumping back into our agenda, we are on human resources. And it looks like we need an executive session to discuss a personnel matter. Thank you, Supervisor Garrity. Second by, thank you, Supervisor McGowan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. That carries. Thanks, everyone, for going back out.